I'm safe.
The city is completely cut off, isolated. We need help. My men cannot do this alone.
Hello guys, and welcome back to another Jensen Media video. Today we are going to be talking about Resident Evil 3 Remake, and it's finally here. I spent the last day and a half on the game, and I've already beaten it, so I just wanted to go over it in a review with you guys in lots of little details, and really go into it as in-depth as I possibly can. So let's go ahead and get started, shall we? So the question is it any good? Well, let's find out. The game certainly is a lot more action-oriented, but I don't really see that as a bad thing here. All the animation is really fluid, and all the action is super solid, with all the zombies, monsters, and of course Nemesis chasing you every which way. The gameplay is definitely fine-tuned here, and better than ever. The game feels quite different as it does mix it up a little bit here and there. Don't think of it as survival horror anymore, it's kind of like an action-oriented horror, which most of us expected it to be that. I mean, the original was a lot more action-oriented as well, and it did get a lot of flack for being different. But the game does turn the action up to 11, because you're getting a lot more zombies now, and they like to travel in packs. And there is an abundance of ammo. You're gonna feel like it's scattered all over the place. So it definitely feels less like you are surviving and more like you are ready to take on a massacre of zombies. That's not to say there isn't any horror elements in the game. The non-zombie enemies are really intense and keep you on the edge of your seat when you encounter them. It's a very drastic change from Resident Evil 2 Remake, but not big enough of a gap to where it's something entirely different. The transition is smooth enough to handle all the changes very well, with a feeling of it being more natural than jarring in most cases. I will say that when it tries to pump you full of action and horror at the same time, that's when it does feel a little jarring. But overall, it tries to do the best it possibly can with everything that it throws in there at you. You can feel the city just begging to be explored, and somehow, even though with all the Walking Dead within it, the city somehow still feels alive, or like it has some sort of life to it at least. You really get a sense of the city and what it used to be when it was lived in and full of people. You'll find things thrown about that will let you explore the stories and some of the people that used to reside within the city, and that just adds an extra layer onto it. It makes it feel a little bit more fleshed out and like Raccoon City used to be something more than it is now, something more than just a dead carcass. On one negative here though, the city isn't all that big. It is very detailed, and yes, it does look pretty awesome, but there just wasn't too much to it, if I'm being honest. The story within the game is about the same as the original, but clearly there is more to it here. There's some extras thrown about the story. Capcom did a good job with the story here. It's pretty faithful to the original and adds its own flair along the way. There are no more branching paths, but what we get is still very well done and really detail oriented. Maybe branching paths could have added more replay value to the game, and I will get to that later on, but it still does a pretty nice job. But with that said, the pacing feels a little bit off here and there with everything that the game tries to do. There are puzzles thrown about the game to try and break up the action, but they are few and far between, as it really chooses to focus more on that action. And like I said earlier, when they do try to play on focusing the action and horror at the same time, sometimes it just gets lost. A lot of the new designs of the non-zombie monsters look really amazingly horrific in the best way possible. And like I said earlier, it adds a ton to the tension when encountering them. And overall for graphics, everything just looks awesome, even on my Xbox One. I would have loved to explore the city without zombies and Nemesis on my tail, as it just does look really haunting with the outbreak completely overwhelming it. The zombies also look really grotesque and haunting, alongside Nemesis just looking absolutely terrifying and amazing in detail. The sound is absolutely also fantastic here, and it is a horrific joy with the surround sound headphones. It's so immersive and almost intoxicating, adding an extra layer to the horror of the game overall. Hearing those audible shuffles off in the distance, or just hearing Nemesis coming for you with his big boots hitting the ground, it's all very horrifying but perfect. The sound and the graphics are great, but there isn't really anything too much different than Resident Evil 2 Remake. They're about on the same page here. There's nothing really going for it that's all that different graphic and sound wise. I mean, Resident Evil 2 had amazingly horrific, gorgeous graphics, and Resident Evil 3 is absolutely no different. And to me, that's still a positive. Next up, let's talk about Nemesis for a minute. No, he is not randomized like we all thought he would be. He doesn't just always chase you, thank God, but he does show up at the exact moments where you really wish he would not, which makes most encounters with him just a pain. He will show up when you least want him to, and oh, I only have a sliver of health left, but I guess I'm gonna die now. Even though Nemi isn't random, he will never-endingly chase you and unrelentingly try to kill you every which way he possibly can, and every second he possibly can when he does have those sequences where he does chase you. And Jesus does this thing move like Jagger. He will stun you every single time you try to escape. He will do whatever he possibly can to kill you with his attacks, and a lot of his attacks are unblockable. You just can't do much to actually get out of the way of he's pretty much a train. This is also where I have a love and hate relationship with how they chose to use Nemesis in the game. Nemesis is actually used pretty sparingly, and when you think about it, it's a little bit of a disappointment. I know they really had to figure out that fine line because no one wants to deal with him all the time, but we expected to deal with him a fair amount. I mean, the original had his name in it. It used him front and center. But in this game, it really just doesn't feel like they really utilized him enough. I mean, he only really chases you throughout the city twice, and after that, the rest of it is just staged set pieces. So we all thought we were getting this hard as nails game where Nemesis would actively be chasing us, and we got the opposite. I feel like there could have been a good middle ground of some sort, and maybe they'll adjust it, maybe they can patch in something, I don't really know. So I don't know, Nemesis was a little bit underwhelming. It is scary when he does chase you, but it's just not enough. And also, this is where you think the dodge ability that you have would come in handy, but it's not all that useful against Nemesis. Yes, when you can dodge him just perfectly and you have that time to really shoot him in the face a few times, it really feels amazing. And you can get really amazingly good at dodging zombies, like a ninja master, but Nemesis is just a different story. It doesn't always work out against him. So Nemesis can be a bit of a pain, but I guess that's a good reason why he doesn't chase you all the time. When you are in boss battles with Nemesis, I'm not going to go in details really, but he is a lot more manageable because they really designed the set pieces to be a little bit different and a lot more methodical and careful when it comes to battling him. But when Nemesis is chasing you though, it just feels like he's pushing you to another objective point. He's just this kind of post that constantly is pushing and pushing you. Doesn't feel like he's just actively chasing you. It's kind of weird feeling, to be honest. I do also want to talk more about the dodge mechanic because it is a godsend against zombies and even sometimes against Nemesis when it does work. It does feel quite clunky in the beginning when you first start the game, but once you really know how to get the timing down and the right time to use the mechanic well, the zombies almost feel like they are no longer a challenge. Because like I said, you kind of feel like a ninja. And it really does get easier and easier to use the dodge mechanic. mechanic. You just have to really learn to use it and get really good at it, and after a while it just becomes second nature. Another issue, and this one's a pretty big issue for me, was that I just wanted more story. The story itself is only about 6 hours long, which isn't really that great to be honest, and that's on standard difficulty. You may get more mileage out of it on the harder difficulties, but I just played it on normal. So maybe when you do start this game, you might want to play on hard. I did enjoy the throwbacks to Resident Evil 2 that it did, and all the stuff it did throw into the game, like when I got to play as Carlos, but it all just felt a little bit short to me. The game does give you reasons to play through multiple times by giving you a store to unlock at the very end when you complete it, which will get you more powerful guns, buffs, and costumes using XP, which you get of course by beating the game. So there's that if you do want to play the game multiple times. And of course some people like to play multiple times for the achievements as well. So I guess the game has that going for it. But to me, I'm probably not going to play through multiple times. Once was enough for me to take in the whole story. It just kind of felt a little bit underwhelming once it's all said and done. It left me really wanting more, and I really don't think I'm the only one. To talk more on the Carlos section of the game, it serves a great purpose to just let out some steam on the zombies as Carlos, and you can really mow them down with his assault rifle, which breaks up how Jill does her thing. It kinda gives small breaths of fresh air into it for a bit, but really it's short-lived. Lastly, there is resistance mode, which is supposed to add a ton of replay value to the game. It's the online 4 versus 1 where 4 survivors try to get through a game as one mastermind tries to shut them down and end them in a quick demise. As the mastermind, you get to throw all sorts of zombies and challenges at them along the way. Each survivor has different abilities and skills that you can use, so you really have to pick and choose the right person that suits your playstyle. Each game has 3 stages that last about 5 minutes long each, which isn't too bad. You can also customize your survivor with resistance points, which is the in-game currency, which you can spend real money on, but you don't really need to because you can earn it by just simply playing the game and leveling up your survivors. The game is fun and I did like it, and I especially liked being the mastermind more than the survivors. I guess I'm just evil that way. It's worth noting that I did play the beta version of Resistance, so who knows what could be different or changed in the final version. It was a lot of fun to me, but it also feels kind of just tacked on to add another layer since the game is like 6 hours long. I guess it's there to help you cope with spending $60 on the game. I believe there was a lot more potential here, and if they made the resistance mode more like an Outbreak style game, I would have really enjoyed it a lot more. I think that would have went over well more in my opinion, but Resistance just doesn't feel all that substantial to me. It doesn't hold my attention for long term. Sure, I may play a few matches here and there if I really feel like it, but it just doesn't feel satisfying enough, and it just doesn't hold my attention honestly. It's not bad, it's just not really for me. Overall, Resident Evil 3 Remake is much more Hollywood style, and it can be quite awesome, but there's just a little bit of flaws here and there with Nemesis, and of course the story, the replayability, and just a few things here and there that just make the game a little flawed, honestly. I feel like Resident Evil 2 Remake did it a lot better and had a lot more going for it overall. I feel like the Resident Evil 2 Remake had a lot more going for it with the replayability and the overall feel and tone of the game compared to this one. It's not really breaking any new ground that Resident Evil 2 did not already do. It is a faithful recreation and retelling of my favorite Resident Evil game, which is pretty awesome, but it just has flaws. It really does, and at the end of the day, I don't know if it's worth paying the $60 for a 6-hour game. And I know a lot of people are going to say, hey, it's still worth it. It gets the job done, but it really left me wanting more out of the story. It really didn't feel complete. Is it still one hell of a game? Is it a roller coaster ride? Yeah, for sure it is. I just wish it would have been a few hours longer. I still enjoyed it, but the game gets a 7 out of 10 for me. Do I recommend going out and buying the game? I would honestly wait until there's a sale, unless you absolutely need to play it now because it is on the shorter side of things. It is a very memorable experience and a blast to play, and some people may get something out of the resistance mode. I'm just not a big online multiplayer sort of guy, and it just again did not feel substantial enough for me to want to keep playing. It's a great game to add to your Resident Evil collection if you are a fan. I would probably just wait for a sale. So that's gonna be it, guys. I am a little bummed that the game wasn't better. I really had high hopes for it. It is still a great game, but the original was my hands down favorite game, so maybe I personally just expected a lot more out of it. That's just me. And these reviews are obviously opinion. You don't have to take my word for it, but that's just how I feel about the game. It doesn't mean everybody's gonna feel the same way. We all have opinions. We all have different complaints. This is just what I personally felt about the game. You may like it more than me. We all don't feel the same way. So take it with a grain of salt if you must. That's gonna be it, guys. Let me know what you think below about the game and if you have played it already. Let me know if you agree or you want to discuss it below. I am always up for discussing. And if you liked the video, feel free to subscribe and share the video. You guys have a good rest of your day and stay safe out there. Thanks for watching.